Hmm.
What's that?
Oh God.
We're live, guys.
Oh.
I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country. Nathan Hale. In the time of revolution, that very well may have been the height of demand of civic duty. 55 years ago, it was ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But since then, it seems like our collective sense of civic duty has been slipping. So what does it mean these days to serve your community? What does it mean to serve your nation? This is the place where questions like that get pondered. This is the where theoretical problems get theoretically solved. This is the place where no idea is a bad idea, except bad ideas and no ideas, because the more ideas you hear, the more likely you are to hear a good one. Welcome to the Brain Trust. Tonight, we've got the Politipod joining us, as well as our normal regulars, Placeholder and Cassie, who Placeholder is actually my co-host, and Cassie's actually our comment section checker and also co-host. Welcome to the show, Pod.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem. Wizard of Cause will be joining us a little bit later to talk about what role civic duty plays in our modern world, which is great because hopefully he'll be running for office soon if he's not already. So it's a great source. Pod, military, excellent source of civic duty.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you start us off? Tell us what you think about what civic duty should be and what it is, in your opinion.
In my opinion, civic duty is something that one is, I guess, not really told to do. It's one of those acts that you're supposed to do. It's one of those it's like a cultural thing to me. It's more like, you know how like we're in America, we have a civic duty to vote. So civic duty to me is something that is inherently within you, just being born in that country. You know, you have someone like me who's joined the military. I vote regularly. I'm up to date on all my elections and stuff. And I also give back to the community. So right there are three things I think are our main civic duties: voting, serving our country, and then giving back to your local communities in any way possible. That's what civic duty is to me, at least.
You said something really interesting there. You just said being informed about the goings on of the country.
Well, and I think that's the other part of that is that whenever you're doing your civic duty, I think it's important that you research and get to know, because you don't want to donate to, like, let's say for instance, you know, helping your community out. Say you donate to a charity and the charity's scummy and it takes your money. You don't want to donate to that. You want to research that charity. Or if you're joining the military, you want to find out what the right job is for you, or if you can even join the military, because some people can't. It happens. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Only 1% of the nation even serves. So, you know, you really have to do your research. You have to research your local candidates, who you think is going to best help your country, your local. That goes for local, state, and federal elections. You know, whoever's going to help you out the most. I think, you know, depending on how bad they are of a person or whatnot, you know, you can make a judgment call off of that. But you really need to research and do your homework on all these topics.
All right. Well, Placeholder, let's grab some ideas from you before you pass out from exhaustion. Damn you, Cassie.
I didn't do anything. Not this time. It wasn't me.
Did he fall asleep? I think he's just muted. Or maybe he did fall asleep. Cassie's been wearing his Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Totally. I'm going to stop crossing that line.
First of all, we're not in the same state anymore.
Like that matters. Anyway.
Good point.
So Cassie, why don't you roll in with some ideas about civic duty from a non-military standpoint?
Yes, I am non-military, and actually, I wasn't even born in the United States.
So, from an immigrant perspective, the idea of civic duty to an adopted country.
I'm not an immigrant. I am technically an American born abroad.
Oh, well done.
So, I have dual citizenship. So, for me, like voting, things like that, in some ways are a privilege, because the fact is most of my family doesn't get to experience things like that. isn't legal in this country, if that makes any sense. So I kind of have learned at a young age to be grateful for what you can do. You know. Does that make sense? Yes,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I guess it keeps you happy too. It's really hard to be angry and grateful at the same time.
Well, when you go to a country like my other country, and you see what it's like there, it kind of makes you realize, don't get me wrong, I love Mexico, but like places like Jico and Rosarito, where you really get to see how third world it is, you kind of have a lot of respect. And you are kind of grateful. Sure, I'll go do jury duty or whatever else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
That's one thing I really look forward to. Every time they call me for jury duty, I get really aggravated when I don't actually get a summons. I'm like, so close.
They never put me on because for some reason they don't like me.
I live in a very populous area, so they send out like tons of letters, and you get the letter and it tells you to call this number every day. And when you call that number, it'll either tell you yes or no. And I always get no's. So it's really frustrating. Like I'm not even picky. Like it could be a burglary or, it doesn't have to be a capital crime. But it would be really fun to be on a jury. Just be like, okay. I don't know. I think my ideals about maintaining a perspective of innocent until proven guilty would really be put to the test in a jury.
Oh. Yeah. Don't even get me started.
I find it a fun challenge.
Don't even get me started on our judicial system and how fucked up it is.
Hey, Pod, you can unmute if you like. I mean, unless you're eating cornflakes or something.
No, I'm here. I'm just listening.
You're just listening to me ramble. That's great.
Yeah. All right. So Pod mentioned the people that can't serve in the military, people such as myself. So quit whining, all you trans. Some of us tried out multiple times and were told by people that it was illegal to lie on these applications with very, very angry faces. So, not all of us get to serve, but there are other ways we can serve our community. Policing, for example. But if you don't want to make a career out of service, I think what are some other good options that we could go for here?
Civil servant. You could be a judge, lawyer. You could work in, obviously the police field. Firefighters are always needed. EMTs, basically first responders of all types. You could work for your local dispatch. Serving your community really is a big thing too. Even serving a jury duty is somewhat a civic duty, I would say as well. I think you can count that in with the duty I was talking about, at least.
Yeah, would you consider a draft to be a civic duty?
Technically it is. You're not really doing anything, but technically just signing up for it. It's already mandated by law, so I wouldn't consider it a civic duty. I would consider it a mandatory duty. But
civic obligation.
Civic obligation, yeah. It's mandatory, so it's kind of a gray area, but I would consider it a civic duty, yeah.
All right, as a placeholder, our placeholder.
Hello.
I have no idea. I was going to say something very clever, but Pod, you just ripped it right out of my head, man. So a placeholder. Now that you've woken up, taken a little nap, got some.
Yes, I feel much better now.
Yes. How's your shot on civic duty?
Well, okay. I am actually one of those people who wanted to serve and is not able to physically serve in the military. So I actually can tell you what it's like. I understand there's nothing to be ashamed of or anything, but I had literally no control over it. It's just really frustrating because it's like, oh, college. Because that's really what I was going to go in the military for, was college. But no, like, there are other ways that you can serve your community aside from just like, picking up trash and maintaining the town that you live in and voting and doing the jury duty, and which I got out of, thankfully. Wow, that thing's an asshole. Sorry. Anyway, going to college and getting an education and becoming a scientist and donating your time and energy to the betterment of humanity, I think, is the ultimate civic duty.
It's on a humanitarian level. I could see that.
Well, how else do you think we discover things like vaccinations?
Accident?
Discover electromagnetism and are now able to potentially go to space. People dedicated their time to not to any one particular nation, but to humanity as a whole. I think ultimately we don't owe any loyalty to the nation in which we live. I think we owe, solidarity at the very least, and make an attempt to improve things around the world in order to achieve globalization and go to space.
Let's be honest. We learned about vaccinations by making the servants milk the cows. Okay, that's where it really comes from.
Not where like polio vaccinations come from.
No, I get what you're saying.
Flu vaccination.
The whole theory comes. The whole theory comes from the idea that the poor milk servants didn't get smallpox, and they seemed immune to it because they all ended up with cowpox early in life.
Yeah.
So
I understand that, but that's a minor disease.
I get it, but the whole theory spawns from that concept.
No, I understand that. That doesn't mean that since then the science hasn't grown.
Of course. So, actually, what's the guy with the water pump in London? Ended the cholera epidemics.
I don't know.
Help me out. You can almost think of his name. Somebody in the chat, do something. Is there somebody in the chat? There's somebody in the chat. Do something.
Well, I don't think savings is going to help us very much. Sorry. I love the girl, but yeah.
All right, so he actually ended the cholera epidemics just by studying microorganisms in the water. So yeah, I could definitely see educational application. Sewer engineers.
The name of that is Dr. Jon Snow.
His name is Dr. Jon Snow. I should have known that. Oh my god.
No, his name was Robert Paulson.
No, his name
was Robert Paulson.
His name literally was John. Paulson. His name was Jon Snow. That's a thing. Yeah, well, stranger than fiction.
Yeah, his famous thing was the Broad Street pump.
That's what yeah, everybody remembers the name of the pump. Son of a bitch.
I guess he watched them. He watched a group of people that didn't get cholera and tracked down whether they drank from a water pump and determined from that how best to cure the disease.
Yep. And the Broad Street pump was found to be like right next to a sewage cistern that was leaking or something. So everyone was drinking poop-flavored water. It's great. Anyway, back to brainstorming civic duty. There is virtue, I guess, in cleaning the poop flavor out of the water.
There's also virtue in harvesting the Oort cloud and becoming unbelievably rich.
Yeah.
And turning into Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong, either one of you. No. I would say that probably the best thing you can do as of right now for civic duty, if you can't join the military, if you can't do jury duty, go be like a firefighter or first responder, I'd say. What do you think about that place?
Well, I think that's a good idea for people who can do that, but there are also people who cannot. They're just kind of in a shit position when it comes to civic duty.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do other things as well. Like you can do community outreach, and you can do like a fundraiser and improve a school somewhere in the inner city, or improve the highways between small towns in order to increase traffic so those cities grow.
Mhm.
Like you can engineer the country.
So I would say, yeah, that's probably a good idea too. But I would consider that. Well, what were my three things I talked about before? Serving your country, voting, and then helping your community. I would consider that more helping your community instead of serving your country.
Yeah, and honestly, I believe that serving your community is a bigger step forward than serving your country. Don't get me wrong, I love my country, but your community that's where your children live. So, start at home, work out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say this though, that in times of war, I think serving your country is a bit more important. But other than that, I mean, yeah, I think I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah. I had another one. So,
what with conscientious objectors?
No,
What's
hold
that?
on. There have been conscientious objectors who have still served in the military.
There's one that was a very famous hero for the military in World War I. His name was Alvin C. York.
Yeah, he didn't even carry a gun, did he?
No, he carried a gun. He just never shot anybody. If I'm remembering the story correctly, the story goes is that he walked up on a German position. Actually, no, he shot two people. He was a conscientious objector. He didn't want to go to war, but he went anyways because his command talked him into it. He shot two people, or wounded two. He didn't even kill them. I think he just wounded them. And then he captured almost 1,000 German soldiers by himself single-handedly because he pretended like there was like a huge group surrounding him. So they thought that they were outnumbered. So they surrendered. They threw down their weapons, walked out, and whenever they saw it was just him, they just sighed and walked to the American encampment. Pretty funny, man. It's pretty funny. Alvin C. York's actually where we got the name Carbine or Carbine. The carbine rifle is named after him because his middle name was Carbine.
Interesting. Well, I mean, Smedley Butler was the most decorated war hero all the way up until World War II. Or most decorated Marine.
Zodie Murphy.
Yeah, and then comes Audie Murphy. And Smedley Butler was not just a conscientious objector. He wrote the book War is a Racket. So, I mean, like, he hated war. I think the last line in that book was, "To hell with war." He died right before we got involved in World War II, but he had already written several letters letting everybody who needed to know that should war break out, he would be more than ready to put his uniform back on and go into it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those other things. Just the willingness to go, I think, also can count as civic duty in some sense. It's not as large of a contribution, but I still think it is some part of a contribution. Yeah.
What about civic morale?
Civic morale.
Yeah.
Well, see, and that's where the civil servants come in. Like they're supposed to maintain the city and help the poor and make sure that the city stays clean. That's what civic servants are for. They serve the city.
Whenever you say morale, like morale in what sense? Like just keeping morale up, or like what? Are you,
well, I mean, would that count as a civic duty if, like, you were to form a coalition of people whose job it was to go around boosting people's spirits to keep the boys fighting and all this other stuff?
Well, yeah, I think people did that during World War I and World War II here. Yeah. You had, it's not just civil servants. It's also people who worked in factories. There were just regular citizens who went out and bought war bonds and were voicing their support for our troops. And I think that kind of went out the window during Vietnam. And I think that's really why we ended up technically losing Vietnam, even though we out-killed the other side about 17-1. But
military victory, political loss.
Yeah, exactly. It's whenever you have demoralizing ramifications back at home, you're not going to win in the eyes of the people, at least, so that's really something that people should watch out for in terms of, like, during a war. If you have a group of people that go and they are not supportive of the country, and no matter what their deal is, whether it's they object to the war, whether they think that we should join in 17 other wars, whatever it is. If you're not somewhat homogenous during that time, it's going to lead to trouble. That's why you see a lot of crackdowns during wartime on freedom of speech and stuff. And even though I don't like it, I think sometimes it is necessary in order to protect, the country as a whole. That's why you have people who were passing out the flyers. I think it was World War I, was it? I forget what the name of the case was, but they were passing out military flyers. They were saying, "Don't sign up for the draft."
It was distributing political material anonymously. It was McIntyre versus Ohio.
Yeah. So, and he ended up getting big trouble for that, if I'm not mistaken.
Nope, they won.
Did they win? I thought they did.
Because it's political speech. It cannot be curbed by the government, no matter how much they don't like it.
I thought because it was during wartime, they ended up actually just not. They passed it. Like he said, during wartime, it's not appropriate, and they ended up stopping it. Maybe I'm remembering this wrong. Maybe it was a different one.
We might be remembering two different things because
it might be. Who knows? We can check it later.
Let's step away from war for just a moment and talk about. Let's say that you're a shop owner. Would you consider it civic duty, fulfilling a civic duty, or at least a civic responsibility, if, let's say, you're closed on the weekends and you decide to open your shop up for community events and affairs? Not necessarily your shop, but let's say you have a big parking lot, you throw up some tents every single weekend, and you host a community fair of some degree.
Well, you'd be boosting the local economy.
Yeah, like a farmer's market.
You would do it every weekend, but you'd be able to do it like maybe every other weekend. That way, you're not milking the populace, drive all their extra money, and you can collect taxes on all of that money, and all that tax money goes right to the military.
We're just not going to get away from war, are we?
No.
All right, so let's back up a minute. Let's replace this fair with a community farmers market. Like, there are a limited number of tables, first come, first serve. You're basically there to maintain the peace when there's only one table left and two people show up. But you just open it up, no charge, free tables, first come, first serve. You can bring your whatever it is that you do on the weekends and use our entire place to have one big community outing, and farmers market, trade fair. There you go. Something more like that. Yeah, I think that would be an excellent community service to donate your parking lot on a weekly basis to such a cause.
That might help, yeah. Possibly. It really depends on how big of an impact it has. That's the thing I think we're forgetting this, because depending on how big of an impact depends on how much of a civic duty it is, I would argue.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because let's say you have a small parking lot. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You start.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Let's say you have a small parking lot. Like 3 cars can fit there. Opening up your parking lot for that event is not going to help in any major way aside from 3 people.
Fair enough. But I did say you have a sizable parking lot.
You have a sizable parking lot.
It's a Walmart parking lot.
If it's a Walmart parking lot, it depends on how far away it is, though. Because if you're opening up your parking lot and it's 3 blocks away, yeah, it's probably better than having them park 2 miles away. But if your your parking's open for the thing and it's like way down the road, like a mile, that's not really going to help anybody.
I'm just saying the donation of personal time and services and property for
why do you think Boy Scouts donate so much of their time? Boy Scouts do crazy amounts of
time. I know. I was a leader for a couple of years.
Yeah. Like, I was in for 7 years. I was patrol leader, assistant senior patrol leader. Like, no, we did crazy amounts of community service, like, constantly. And that's like doing small things around town, like planting flags on veterans' graves, or planting the flags for the 4th of July parade that goes through town that you leave up for 2 months for some insane reason, and then you take down in the middle of the summer. My town wasn't very smart. But there are, and the things that you learn in that organization also help you do community service, because you learn a new skill that you can utilize towards the end of improving your local community, unless you're the radioactive Boy Scout.
Yeah, we didn't have many of those in our troop.
We almost did in mine.
Yeah. I think anything that's serving the youth, as long as you're not there for the wrong reasons, I think that's definitely, when it's community youth, things like helping with the Boy Scouts, helping with little leagues and stuff like that. I don't know if I consider it a civic duty. I definitely consider it a civic responsibility.
What's the difference?
There's an obligation to a duty. That's why I consider.
But a responsibility also is an obligation.
Not necessarily. You can be irresponsible. An obligation.
Right. You can also be like unconscientious and not fulfill your duty to the community. So what's the difference?
It's an obligation. A duty is an obligation. You have to do it.
So is a responsibility.
Guys, I think we're arguing semantics here. We're arguing like names of words right now. Or definitions of words, are they?
I don't know. I just see one as more intense and obligatory. An obligation, a duty is it's more. You can have a responsibility. You could be irresponsible, and not necessarily it'd be a big deal. But when you screw up on a duty, that's a big deal. I think that's the difference.
Oh, I was unmuted. I'm sorry. I was just typing away on my keyboard. My bad, man.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, go ahead, by the way. I'm really trying to get away from careers in military and first response, because let's say you have you have somebody in a wheelchair. They're not going to be a first responder. They're not going to be I don't know, anyone in a wheelchair. Okay, that wasn't towards me. Never mind.
Womp womp.
They're not going to be a police officer. They're not going to be a first responder, and they're not going to be in the military.
They could totally be a first responder. They could absolutely be a first responder. They could be exactly.
They could be a dispatch.
First responder. They could be dispatch. That is precisely what we actually have a disabled person who works in our dispatch, and he's very good at it. He's a very good first responder, dispatch person, and he helps with first responders. So I consider them first responders because they literally have to manage fire, police, and emergency services throughout the entire city. No matter how big it is, they still have to direct people where to go, where this is happening. They have to answer questions. They have to be calm and cool and collected as well. I think that takes almost as much duty and courage as a EMT or a firefighter or police. And almost as much. Not as much, because there's other things that they don't happen to have that
they don't get
shot at. They don't get, burned alive, but they have a very stressful job, and I respect them for it.
Yeah, they don't have cars exploding on them and shit like that. We have a really excellent first response unit out here in the Atlanta area called the Hero Unit, and they just basically drive up and down the highways and all over the major surface streets, looking for cars that are over on the side of the road with like a flat tire. Or like people with their flashers on whose car is overheating, or maybe there's a minor fender bender, and they can get the traffic moving, get people off the road, and get let the police get out there, stuff like that. We go ahead, Pod. We actually have pretty bad traffic here in the Atlanta area, so I guess it's kind of a necessity, but those guys, they named them perfectly. The Hero Units, those guys are awesome. They're like the tow truck you want to see. Why are you guys all muted?
I'm not muted.
We're listening to you.
I'm not. I'm not that interesting.
Would you like me to type into your ears while you're talking? I don't. I hate that when
No, I just
other
like
people do that
like
to me.
verbal communication, man. Just jump in
I'm
there.
sorry. The small people were talking. I don't think everybody wants to hear the small people.
Wow. Putting all the hype on me. Okay. Poopity scoop. There you go. Oh man.
Our good Emperor Pod here.
Emperor Pod, get the hell out of here, dude. Get the hell up out of here.
I'm just gonna give you the good Emperor Pod because God Emperor is taken at the moment.
Yes, and he must lead the Imperium of Man into the grim future of the 41st century. Or 41st millennium.
Why?
Emperor Tide Pod, exactly. I'm gonna illegally change my name to Tide Pod. Jesus. Oh my God. That's funny.
I thought your name was Polly T Pod.
Polly T Pod.
That the T stood for Tide.
Yeah, Polly Tide Pod.
Yeah. Because they call you Polytide because you eat many of them. that was a Greek joke. Get it?
I get it. I understand your joke. I see where you're coming from, and I appreciate you for it.
Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Say no more.
Dab.
God.
It looks delicious, but will kill you in violent fashion. Oh yeah, if you're a Tommy, you're going out the helicopter.
How are you seeing where I'm coming from? I don't even have it out.
Sidekick, guys. We know this.
Sorry.
Let's
go back to
Oh my
PG.
God.
Oh boy. Oh my God.
Woo!
So I just watched Disenchantment.
I feel like we're getting off topic.
He has the giant
You
eye.
think? We're very much off topic now.
He has the giant what?
He has the giant's eye that lets him see the truth.
Oh, and Disenchanted?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried watching that, but it was I want to say like
Simpsons parody.
The first couple episodes were rough.
it was also 12:30 a.m. So
Why are you watching things so early?
I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, so I throw on Netflix.
Oh man. So modern civic duty.
Yes, modern.
As opposed to older civic duty. What do you think the civic duties of the people of this country were, say, in 1782?
Well, in my introduction, I talked about how Nathan Hale said, my only regret is I have but one life to lose for my country. And that was, I mean, a little extreme. Yeah, I'll give him that. He definitely outdid us all. Way to one-up us, Nathan. But you know, on the same token, you go back 55 years and you have ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And that was the mindset that people kind of latched onto for what civic duty really meant. So these days in the narcissistic world of my group's lives matter.
My group's lives matter.
Yeah, my like there are brackets here.
Brackets, insert group here.
Insert group
lives
name.
matter. Yeah.
My group.
My group matters.
My group matters. Yeah, that's of course, you know, ask what everyone can do for me and why I'm important, you know, kind of mindset that we have today.
Yep.
Rather than what you can do for your country. And I think that's the thing about our civic duty is dipping is we're all concerned about ourselves. I think we've been kind of cultured to be that way, which is shitty but true. But that being the case, what actually is it today? What does it count for?
See, that's why for me, like when we're talking civic duty, I'm not thinking in the short to medium term. I'm thinking long to distant long, like way over the horizon type looking. And that's why I'm saying we should become patrons of the arts and sciences, specifically the sciences, but also the art because we need it.
I think he just touched on something Concept Hut is talking about in the chat here, where he said, "Is a country its people, its government, or its culture?"
A country is a group, is an association of people who assemble themselves into a dominant hierarchy which allows for peace to exist long enough for them to get into war, crush other countries, grow into a massive empire, and then become peaceful, finally. The British Empire did this, the American Empire is doing this, the Chinese Empire did this. It's natural for humans to do this.
Mm-hmm. So here's what I want to touch on a little bit. I like reading a little bit about Thomas Paine, and I was actually reading this not too long ago. Thomas Paine actually said that each right has a corresponding duty. Paine said the first duty is to be kind to others, and that a person's corresponding duty is to allow the same rights to others as we allow ourselves. Do you think that this falls in with this topic at all?
I think it does, actually, quite a bit. And I think Thomas Paine was probably the most hardcore Ninth Amendmentist ever.
Well, yeah, probably. I would assume so. Welcome, Wizard of Cause. How are you?
Hey, bud. Not bad.
So, we're talking civic duty, and how is your political ambition going these days, Wizard?
Slowly. I mean, I'm waiting for the primary to be over because I don't need to really expend any resources there because it's uncontested. So, yeah, I'm just sort of waiting for the for like the real big thing, and that's just going to be a lot of ground pounding and door knocking kind of stuff. It's a small race, so there's not much to it.
What's the race for?
I'm a state rep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well,
so we're here talking about it. You're out there doing it. Congratulations.
Well, I mean, I spent a number of years in politics, like working campaigns and the like, and after, I mean, like, I haven't actually really worked one in a number of years just because, like, it's a shitty industry to be in. But pays well. But no, it's interesting because, like, the state I live in, and you talk about civic duty and the like, it really is more a matter when you run for state office here. It's more a matter of actually just doing the governing than anything else. It pays $100 a year. You do get a free easy pass, I'm told, but yeah, it's actually the world's most representative legislature. It's like 1.3 million residents of the state, and there are 400 lower house reps. So it should be interesting to see if it's even possible to get anything done there.
That is a lot of people for a small group or a small state.
Yeah, it's I mean, well, New Hampshire is an extremely political state anyway. Outside of the primary, there's not a whole lot that makes it really relevant at all. But when the primary happens, it turns into a fucking circus here. You got like celebrities and just politicians everywhere, and it's so small, it's hard not to run into them. But yeah, I mean, the sitting rep for this ward that I'm running is also a city alderman, apparently. And that's just, yeah, it's weird. There is sort of a political class here in New Hampshire, but again, it is more like that sort of, you could almost say like the founding era sense of sort of duty. Like, back then people would like run for local and municipal seats and county level thing, and it wasn't like a matter of ambition a lot as much as it was oftentimes just sort of seen like as something that they needed to do. It was their duty to help, to pitch in, and to make things work.
Yeah, that's I think what the founders envisioned our national government to be more like, rather than a constantly sitting body. By the way, for representation, Massachusetts, with its 400 state representatives in the lower house, compares to Texas with its 150. Just to give you an idea of the the difference in the amount of political concentration there. And
Massachusetts is a really interesting place there too. Now they've got 6.8. Oh, they've got almost 7 million residents there, and that's still a concentrated legislature. But the odd thing with Massachusetts is, though, it's also a common law state. So, like, the application of legislation there is really fucking weird. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. But I mean, they've also got like they got a really robust ballot initiative process too. Massachusetts really is another state where there's a really like heavy, very strong sort of spirit of being involved and of, you know, taking action and I mean, from the petitions up through like local and state governments, because I think again it comes down to it being small. You know, small state, it's you're more likely to run across somebody who has something to do with how it's run, or you're more likely to try and do something to help run it yourself.
Well, I've been waiting for you to get here to ask this question, and this is for everybody. Do you believe that activism in and of itself is a variant or version of civic duty?
It can be. It depends on what they're agitating for.
No, hold on. Who makes the decision of what's good and what's bad?
Oh, the people who decide to support or oppose the campaign. It's not censorship. It's people disagreeing. It's political discourse.
So what you're saying is it can be depending on your perspective.
Well, certainly. Your politics absolutely color everything you do in your life.
So when I said
Really, unfortunately, but you're kind of right on that.
So essentially speaking, and I'm not trying to Kathy Newman this, but essentially speaking, you're saying what you're saying is that everybody's opinion will be what everybody's opinion is.
Yeah, people are individuals and should be treated as such.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. Cassie, activism for activism's sake.
Okay. I'm somebody who was raised by a hippie. So I have a very different view because I was always taught if you believe in something and you strongly believe in it, it doesn't matter. And even no matter what anybody else says, even if you believe in it, you have to fight for it. But is it a civic duty? I don't know. And then if you want to add in today's lovely activism, don't even get me started on that. So it's kind of hard to say, you know.
All right, Wizard, your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, as somebody who, you know, who was a professional activist for a while, I'd say most of it's rooted in a sense of such. You know, it's kind of it's like that old saying, you know, everyone is the hero of their own story, right? You know, you do have some craven people. I was like that too, just going out and doing the shit for the money. But I mean, you know, even with the sort of cringeworthy shit that we see now, I would say that, you know, it's still, you know, it is still rooted in some sense of civic duty. People, you know, they've got enough of a belief structure that pushes them to go out and try and take action on it. Now, whether or not one agrees with what they do, I mean, that's kind of irrelevant. If if it's a sense that lives within them that spurns them to go and do these sorts of things, then I'd say absolutely. But I would also say that given that a lot of it is, I don't want to say corporate, like institutional. If you ever want an interesting thing, you ever want to like peek at something interesting, go to like democraticgain.com or I'm trying to remember the old job resources. You can even just check, actually, like take a look at Craigslist under nonprofit. You'll see, like, you know, you'll see all these little satellite, like little tiny campaigns on issues, and what you come to find out is that 9 out of 10 times they're backed by these big nationwide multi-million-dollar political machines. And And it is funny because the activists who get involved taking it as a job, a lot of times, most of the time, I would say, they really believe, they really believe in the cause, which tells you that they haven't done this much. But it's, I think because it's a personal matter, I think the degrees to which activism itself is an act of civic duty. I mean, fundamentally it is, but I think on an individual level, the degrees vary, person by person.
Awesome. Hey, man, you're echoing.
Oh, am I?
Pretty loud.
Yeah, hold on.
There. No, I'm still coming back.
Wait, then it's not me.
All right, who's echoing? Find a placeholder.
Am I echoing? Are you guys hearing me back through my speaker? Sorry, guys. I hate to do this.
That's okay. Yeah, it is you. That's good. I hate my headphones.
Who doesn't hate their headphones? I like mine up until I'm like, hey, man, you should check this out. Shit.
No, now it's worse.
Is it echoing on your end?
No.
I can hear myself through someone.
All right. Hold on, let me go ahead and mute and placeholders start talking.
Okay. I hear myself. It's not coming from me.
All right, well, Pod and Cassie are muted. You go ahead and mute real quick.
Okay, hang on one second.
Well, let's see. I can still hear where the hell is that coming from?
No, it went away. Yeah.
It was him. Ha. Bastard.
Yeah, trying to sneak one in on us. All right, you wanna? Yeah, thanks, buddy. Anyway, back to civil. We were talking about activism for activism's sake. I honestly don't think of it as a civic duty. I'm all for activism, and I'm all for standing up for things. I don't know if I'd classify as a civic duty, though. I think it might fall under a different heading. I think the intentions are different. And in my perspective, a civic duty is something that makes your community a better place without necessarily angering people or creating hostility, or in some extreme cases, say offing half the population or something like that.
Okay, Thanos.
Wasn't going for that. No, I was thinking outside
Mr.
of
Cause.
Yeah.
I don't feel so good.
Yeah. What pleases one and angers another a lot of times, though. And I mean, not all activism is this like angry millennial, like,
hate rage.
Yeah, that's, I mean.
You know what the problem is? That they make controllers indestructible. And these millennials, they don't have an outlet. In my day, you could just smash your controller and you'd be fine.
Yeah, right.
You're like, shit, now I got to buy a new controller.
Well, it was funny, like with when I was a union organizer, right? So like most of the time, if anyone, a lot of people aren't even familiar with what it is or how it works. Most of the time, people think of like union activism as strikes and like picketing, and then you can get into like the nasty shit, like the Hoffa shit and that kind of thing. But the first campaign really surprised me because when I got hired on, that was what I was prepared for. And then when I got out there, the first campaign itself was actually organizing home care nurses. And it was a very mundane process. And it was like when they got their, when they got their union charter and they got their, negotiating, they got their negotiations going and everything. It wasn't contentious or hostile or anything. It was actually very sort of mundane, friendly kind of deal. And activism itself is that. Now it's the fashionable kind of shit that we see these days with like these Antifa idiots or these moronic, the new edgy right, the Proud Boy types and all that garbage. they exist solely for that. They are by nature and definition antagonistic, even in spite of what they claim to stand for. I mean, I've been to shit. I was at a Proud Boy rally in Massachusetts just a few months ago, and like they showed up looking for shit, ready for shit, hoping Antifa would show up. It's what they wanted, and you know, and it's those are actually kind of outliers though, because you know, you if somebody, you know, like what is it, collecting signatures to get a stop sign put somewhere, that's activism, and that is an effort to make a community better. That is the nature of it.
You
And I
know,
mean,
and
and
that
yeah.
whole thing, your stop sign argument was the most convincing to me.
That's the thing about it's like the thing about politics in general. A lot of people like think of it as, you know, especially these kids who want to see revolution and shit, right?
When I think of activism, that's what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. That's an outlier. That's definitely an outlier. Because even when like, I mean, going door to door, knocking on doors, um, even when you're in like, you know, in the professional field level of things, right? If you're not, you know, knocking on doors, then you're managing people who are knocking on doors. You're managing a room full of people making phone calls, bothering people during dinner. It's, you know, and politics itself is mundane, really. Most people, I mean, it's funny, like I've heard a lot of people, like when they heard I was running for state rep, yeah, you know, they have these different ideas, and it's not going to be like heated floor debates or like, you know, trying to make epic changes. It's going to be sitting in like long, exceedingly boring meetings about highway budgets and shit. And that's like, it's you know, it's the difference between perception and reality, is that, you know, it's the same with activism, because all we see is these clashes of idiots in the streets who, you know, who want to bring about some great sweeping change, and change doesn't really happen that way typically, and if it does, it's very seldom good.
Yeah, I always have my suspicions that the actual fights that you see are a lot smaller than they're perceived to be. And the reason I always thought that was because out of everybody in those giant masses of people, I would guess between 50 and 60% of them are there holding up a camera.
Yeah.
And then there's like 20 guys in the middle, like running back and it kind of looks more like a mosh pit, you know, like a really big mosh pit, but still a mosh pit, than a fight. And I always thought that was very interesting, that the vast majority of people at, you know, in all the major footage that you see on loop from like 68 different angles, that it generally tends to be mostly cameramen.
Yeah, and I mean, things have naturally and observably gotten worse, you know, in recent times. But you know, still, I mean, shit. I remember I went to that Boston free speech rally. It was like a year ago. It was actually, yeah, it was in August of last year. And I mean, I went down there expecting some crazy shit. Antifa were like, you know, their Facebook groups and all that shit were like alight with we're gonna go bash the fashion, all this. When I got there, you know, for one thing, like the event itself was the main event was really small. The real event was the counter protest, which itself was one of these instances. I mean, I saw Antifa kids just sitting around; they weren't doing shit. People were like, there were people walking by and harassing them, and they didn't do shit. You know, because you know, they are actually just a bunch of pussies. You can tell anyone who masks up and does shit like that is a pussy. But yeah, I mean, it was, you know, it was just a lot of people showed up just to feel like they were part of something. And I think that's part of what really corrupts the nature of activism itself and makes the question, is it an act of civic duty in the first place? Because you know, in a properly functioning society, the answer should be automatically yes. Because as I said, like, you know, getting that stop sign, that's really what it is. A lot of these kids, though, they go out and they like wave the hammer and sickle, and you know, they act like hyped up lunatics and shit. Those are you know, those are sort of, you know, they are the outliers, and a lot of them, they don't go up. You know, they might have true beliefs in their head, but the reality is most of them go to show up just to be a part of something.
Yeah, I tend to believe that the vast majority of them in 10 years will be nowhere near the same people, and if they are, then they'll have wasted 10 years and learned nothing. But let's placeholder. You back with us again?
Yeah, I've been here.
Pod and Cassie, you guys are being kind of quiet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing things and doing and talking to people.
I
So-
see. I see. We're here talking it. No, I get it. Our level of importance is right about yay. So,
No.
by the
I'm
way,
listening. I'm doing 50 things at once.
by the way, as we're running in on 12 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know that the Brain Trust meets here every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To discuss and brainstorm any given topic for the week. If you have topics, feel free to shoot me a link over at Twitter. I am Dolphin Radio, joined by my co-host here, Placeholder, and Cassie. Special guest tonight, Wizard of Cause and the Politipod. Thank you guys for joining us. We're here every Wednesday night, and we also have a debate scheduled every Friday night at 9 p.m. We're going to keep going. I just wanted to throw that wonderful little shill in there so I don't forget it whenever we do shut down. But outside of, we were talking about military, we were talking about careers, we've talked about political activism, we've talked about political service. What outside of that really counts? I mean, we've also brought up voting, and I believe, yeah, I think voting about caps it all. Have we really hit on all areas that really qualify as civic duty, and what it means today? Like, what do you think people's sense of civic duty today is? Is it high? Is it low?
Well, I suppose it would depend on which demographics we're talking about.
Yeah.
So there are people who think, who can serve their community in a different way, which I kind of said earlier, but dedicating your life to pursuit of a field, not necessarily as a career, but just for research, would be an amazing boon if we could get more people to do it.
There's also, and then, I think it also comes back to, that question of the grand versus the mundane. I would say that somebody who goes to, and this is something I was actually looking at doing myself, just because I like, I like these kinds. It's a nice way to kill your time, but it's somebody who goes to like a library and reads to kids. Somebody who goes to a soup kitchen and feeds the homeless. Those sorts of little things that make a big difference to somebody else, and they pile up, stack up, and they really make what the fabric of a community ultimately is. And so I'd say in a certain sense, actually, too, those sorts of things, because they're so small and effectively thankless, with the exception of those who say thank you, but you're not making any sweeping grand changes. But I'd say in many senses, those sorts of things would actually, I'd say, be considered more dutiful and the like than even running for office, because you're not, when you there's a running for, if you attain office, you have power, you can make change, you can do all this and that, and when in most states it's a job, you get paid for it. When someone takes their own time, out of their own, whatever their own schedule might be, and they take their own time and they go do something, not for thanks, not for power, not for anything more than it's a good thing to do, that's the quintessential definition of civic duty, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that also kind of touches back to, you're talking about like serving in the soup kitchen, and the personal thanks are pretty much the only thanks you get. And I think that kind of relates back to the concept we were talking about earlier, when it's you have your local is at the heart, and then you go community out, and then nationwide. So it's more important to serve your local community than it is to serve your nation. Not that it's unimportant to serve your nation, but it's more important to serve your community, because that's where you're at.
Yeah, you individually have a bigger impact doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can give to the March Dimes, or you can go to a nursing home and spend time with the lonely elderly people.
Yeah, and it's also, you see like a politician walking down a line of hands, shaking, almost smiling, and each person gets 1.2 seconds, and versus a guy sitting down for 20 minutes to read to a kid at a hospital.
Mhm.
No, it's and I think, I mean, it's funny because when we look back like to the more original sort of like conceptual Republican ideals of the founding of the country, right? And this is like the point that pisses off the gun rights crowd a lot when you bring up how militias worked then. I mean, the original intent, the standing military was never really a plan. We originally there was no plan to maintain one. But then,
There wasn't a Department of Defense, it was the Department of War, and it was only brought together in times of war.
yeah, and I mean, even still, then there's having an army. The notion being that it would be like basically like contingents of local and state militias that were used for defense purposes. But even outside of all of that, being part of the militia, typically it was it was an unofficial conscription basically, and it was a sort of thing like everyone who could serve in the militia, every able-bodied man who could serve in the militia did, not because they were necessarily compelled to legally, but because they were morally and socially compelled to. It was expected of them. They stood up and they went and did what was expected of them, and that right there was it's sort of like it's a notion of an unwritten code. And that kind of thing right there, though, it was it wasn't to go to war and defend the country. There was no like thank you for your service kind of stuff. It was just what you did and what you were expected to do. That was your civic duty, and you were to take that responsibility seriously. And to a certain extent, when voting rights became a bigger thing, it was it was a lot like voting. You're expected to go and vote. It's part of your civic duty. You don't have to, but people expect it of you. I'd say a funny thing with it is that so I mean I remember not even all that long ago, the biggest complaint, left and right, in terms of politics and civics was that everyone is apathetic, nobody cares. And that's what happens when you have prosperity, is people get comfortable. And now we've got like the opposite problem, where too many people care too much.
So would you say that's led to an increase in civic, a need for, or a feeling of civic duty and people like wanting to run for office? Because I'll concede that as much as I argue that it feels like civic duty and the sense of civic duty in this country is kind of waning, in that area, it really seems to be picking up some speed.
Yeah, we can look at what's her name, Cortez there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, people love taking dumps on that whole campaign because she's just some like millennial socialist, But again, she's running because she truly believes that she can help affect change that she believes will be beneficial to people, and she's got a sense of civic duty for certain. You may not agree with what she believes in, but it's there. You can't argue with the spirit.
Well, when I found out she was a bartender, it kind of made a lot of sense to me, because I used to run karaoke shows in bars for years and years. I ran them, and you meet a lot of interesting people, and you have a lot of conversations like the one that we're having right now about what is civic responsibility, like what is the role of the government, what is the role of the citizen, what is the role of the army. You have these arguments about politics and social ideologies all the time because everyone's drunk, and for some reason the rule about leaving politics at the door goes out the door.
There needed to be a rule
Every time.
Every time, yeah, you throw alcohol in the mix, and suddenly, like, I'm a Democrat, but I like you, and suddenly you've got a conversation going. It's an interesting liquid.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, I mean, I forget who said it recently, but most modern socialists, and I'd say most socialists throughout history, were just people who felt undervalued, underpaid, and hated their jobs.
I think that's a fairly accurate assessment.
No. I mean, when you look at its roots too, everybody loves screaming about Marx, right? Nobody talks about Engels. Fuck's sake. And I mean, when you look at the time period and what was going on at the time when Marx and Engels were doing their various works, Engels was the one. I should actually saw recently somebody was like, why is there a statue of Friedrich Engels in Manchester, England? And it's because Engels was deeply rooted there because Manchester was sort of the heart of the English labor revolution, and it was where the factory workers and the real laborers and the people who were they'd lose hands and lives working. They weren't getting paid shit, shipwrights and shit like that. Whatever they made in Manchester, I'm not sure, but that was like that was sort of the epicenter of the labor movement. And at the time, the gripes they had were very legitimate. They were like a serf class living at the whim and whimsy of the industrial, the captains of industry at the time. And so when you look at that and you compare it, to what it's like now, I mean, a Brooklyn bartender, of course, she's going to think that there's like, social inequity, and she's going to be able to see that, because what the fuck kind of money is she really making, and how much does it cost to live where she does?
Yeah.
Well, if you're a woman and a bartender, you tend to make a little bit more money than men.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that's probably why. Probably how she could afford the fee to run.
Yeah.
By the way, Massachusetts, you said that it had like the very servant-minded government politician. I like that. I like that mindset. Is there a fee to run?
Well, there's a fee to run everywhere. I mean, here it's $2. I don't know what it is in Massachusetts.
Okay.
I'm in New Hampshire.
Oh, I'm sorry. For some reason, I keep saying Massachusetts.
No, I mean, it's a New England thing, really. I mean, we're raised with revolutionary history. Like that's like it's like when I lived in the South, I always found it funny because in the South, everyone knows everything about the Civil War, right?
Well, I grew up in Texas, and they have 3 years of Texas history. So yeah, there's
the Civil War. Civil War, also known as the War of Northern Aggression.
That's how they referred to it.
As I've since learned since moving down here.
Yeah. Yep, that's how you refer to it there. I lived in Louisiana. But in the same way the Civil War is such a central part of history and the culture down there, the revolution, because so much of it took place here, it's huge. And between that and the small nature, like geographically small and population wise small areas, the sense of involvement and engagement is a lot richer than I would say. Like if you went out to California, right? Like no matter what you do in California, your voice is just one in an ocean. You're just a drop in the bucket. Here, because I'm just saying comparatively. I'm saying comparatively. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of there's a lot of civic engagement out there too.
It's a lot of really big microphones out there too.
Yeah,
and a lot of big hotheads.
Yeah. It's just it's a central piece of the culture here. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying that over here, because I'm in the South right now, southeastern Georgia, and I believe it's something like $5,000 to run for any statewide seat.
Wow.
And that's why I was asking about that, because what is your fee? You're saying it's $2, and that I think you would have a lot more civil engagement in politics in places down here if you lower that fee. But no, you have to generate $5,000 before you can put your name on the ballot for even the primaries.
That's pretty insane. I have heard, and it's like kind of like a common sort of trope in the political world, that especially within the South, there have been a lot of efforts to erect certain barriers, because the class structure in the South historically was a lot more pronounced, because there was a lot more in the way of land ownership, a lot more in the way of agriculture.
I don't think there's barriers so much for the common citizen to participate in government. I think there's a lot of barriers to keep politics amongst a professional class of people who are able to actually make serious campaigns, and that's the argument for it. Is they don't want a campaign where they have 500 people all on the ballot. Because the entry fee was $2 and somebody dared their friend and it turned into a viral sensation. If the fee's $5,000, less likely to go viral, I think, is the mindset. But it is a little steep. I mean, on the other hand, $2 to me seems like they're kind of courting disaster without the culture that they already have. If they tried that here in the South, it'd be a nightmare. It'd turn into a joke, and by the end of it, they'd have a 2,000 people on the ballot, and they'd have to shut it down. They'd be like, "No, we're not taking any more names on the ballot."
Well, no, you also though you get to things such as like party affiliation, right? Because if you want to run as an independent here, you need to get a certain number of signatures to demonstrate that you have a viable campaign. If you're running for a party ticket, and in my case, I'm running. I joined the Libertarian Party, which is really, if I told myself from 10 years ago I'd be running for state office as a Libertarian, I'd have fucking laughed in my own face. But
cuss yourself out and like, no.
No, I always found libertarians because it's a free state movement state. So, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. It was a libertarian movement with an idea to identify a handful of states with effectively vulnerable legislatures and runnable races and move there to make a movement in the state. And it's but yeah, I'm running uncontested in the primary, so I don't even need to run a primary campaign. But one thing I will point out, though, is the shit show. I don't think so much the shit show would be 2,000 people on the ballot as much as it would be. Well, I'll just point this out. The only time the New Hampshire state legislature ever seems to make any national news is when one of our reps says or does something extraordinarily stupid, which is kind of common because
400 of them.
Yeah, if you're gonna run for state rep here, if you're gonna be a part of the legislature here, you're doing it for a handful of reasons. Either you've got some pet issues, you want to see some genuine change in this or that regard, you're looking to just pad a resume with some shit, or you're a fucking nut job and you think it'll it'll give you some kind of power or something. We've had 9/11 truthers in the state house. When the Republican when the Republicans took over last time, one of the first items that came up was making it so you can carry concealed firearms into the Capitol building. And the guy who was really a champion of that ended up dropping his gun on the House floor. So, there's some clown shoes elements to it. I'll say that much.
Yeah, see, that's what I would be worried about. But
what's a citizen legislature, though? That's what you get.
Yeah.
The citizenry is not the citizenry of any given place is never the brightest. It's the average, and the average can be fucking stupid sometimes.
Yeah. I actually was born and raised in Texas, where the attitude towards government is no. And the South has its Civil War, and the North has the Revolution, and Texas has Texas history, which is all about freedom from Mexico, and then a refusal to set up any legitimate government that actually did anything on a statewide level. They really wanted an Articles of Confederation style government because they wanted every local government to manage its own crap and leave them alone. Like the attitude in Texas is just leave us alone.
What's the shit? I'm always forgetting the term. It's basically like Maine has a thing where a local government can actually effectively defy the will of the state government as they choose. Like Maine recently, I believe, legalized marijuana, but before that it even happened, I think it was it York, Maine? Or was it Portland? One of the major cities there, and yes, they actually have cities in Maine. So many people will be astonished to learn this, but yeah, one of the
Thought it was just one big apple orchard.
Yeah, right. No, that's southern New Hampshire, man.
Oh, okay.
No, but there was it was like a nullification process where the city decided it was going to legalize marijuana on its own, and the state really couldn't compel them to do otherwise.
Well, I mean, they have independent electors as well. Like you can't flip all of Maine; you have to flip all the electors.
I believe so, yeah.
Because they only have 2 electors, if I remember right. But each elector can go either way. I think that's how it works in Maine.
I'm looking it up now, just because I mean, like they're fucking 40 minutes to the east, so.
You're like, hold on a second.
Maine and Nebraska both use an alternative method of distributing electoral votes called congressional district method. Currently, these 2 states are the only 2 states in the union to diverge from the traditional winner-take-all method.
Yeah. The electors go based on what it's more of a local election.
Yeah, and let's see. I don't know. It just gets into random questions. And yeah, I mean, New York Times was actually, as of June. Of course, New York Times is going for this, though, because, ever since Trump won, all of a sudden the Electoral College is a problem. And I'm no fan of Trump. I only voted for him because I lost a bet.
Wow.
I wasn't even going to vote, but I lost the bet.
We're live now, right? And you're running for office.
Oh, but I mean, I'm not running for high office. I out of the 10 people, 11 people now watching, I'm curious if any of them are in the 12 blocks that I'm running in. But no, I mean, I'm going to be completely fucking honest this entire election. I'd rather lose an election wearing everything on the outside as it was than win one and have to potentially just deal with shit down the line. I've had people like, oh, aren't you worried about like the shit posts and the weird shit on your channel?
God, after Donald Trump, seriously?
Yeah, if there's one thing Trump taught us, it's that literally anyone can get elected.
So, yes, you can grow up to be president.
Yeah. And it's and I mean, to how with the options of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, how is anyone supposed to take their vote seriously?
I don't know. But anyway, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night. Thanks, man, for hanging out with us, and thank everyone for joining us tonight to discuss civil duty.
Sorry, I was late.
No, it happens, man. You were off doing your duty.
Damn quesadilla.
No, it was funny because my family and I were discussing this earlier. Just for those of you who have children, and my wife and I said something about civic duty, and my 3-year-old comes running in, demanding to see Wreck-It Ralph and asking why the hero flushed his toilet like over and over again. And it was just an hilarious moment. If you were there, you'd have laughed. If you don't think it's funny, fuck you. Sorry.
If you don't think it's funny, you don't have kids. The opposite. It's like kids give you the opposite of dad jokes. They give you kid jokes, which is just as bad, but adorable.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, kids are like little drunk people. Listen to their conversations and tell me I'm wrong.
Oh, just wait.
They're like little drunk people.
Just wait until your kid gets older. I mean, mine's 10 now. And I shit you not. She came into the kitchen like last week or a few weeks back, and so literally came up. She's like, and she's already decided she's an atheist, right? But she like her grandmother dragged her to church and shit for a while, and she's like, Dad, how can the devil? I mean, I know he's not real, but how can the devil be evil? And I'm like, okay, kid, let's explore this. What's on your mind? And she's like, well, his job is to like punish bad people, right? I'm like, that's correct. She's like, then how is he a bad guy? He's just doing a job. I'm like,
it's a really good argument.
Yeah, no, it's the kind of shit they come out with. I mean, we see all the woke 8-year-olds being reported about on Twitter, and it's funny because from time to time, if you got your own kid, they come at you with some amazingly like deep shit. You're like, how? What the fuck websites are you on? Where did this come from?
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old as well.
Oh,
And
so you know,
yeah, they're both boys. So it took them a minute to get around to the actual deep shit. But whenever they say deep shit, they don't realize it's deep yet.
Yeah.
They're just speaking what they think, and you're just like, wow, that's deep. And you're like, wait, God, you came out of my balls, man.
It's like, how did I make you? I look at myself every day in the mirror and wonder how I function.
I'm surprised I'm still alive, and you. Yeah, but anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for taking part, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Have a good one. Peace.